On radioactivity, we're going to look at half-life and radioisotopes. So our learning intentions are to understand the meaning of the half-life of a radioactive substance and to explain the use of radioisotopes. So to begin, we need to understand what the word transmutation means. And transmutation is changing of one element into another. Next, we need to look at a radioactive isotope. These can simply be called radioisotopes, and they are an isotope that have an unstable nucleus that decompose spontaneously by emission of one of the three types of radiation, thus achieving a stable nuclear composition. So it's very similar to your definition for radioactivity. Radioisotopes are very useful. So examples include medical uses, which radioisotopes can be used to penetrate the body to kill cancerous cells. So radiation is a cancer treatment, often referred to as radiotherapy. They can be used archaeologically, and this is where the carbon-14 isotope comes in, that we mentioned in a previous video about the nature of radioactive substances. And this is when a tree dies, carbon-14 decays, and the rate of decay can be used to find the age of the tree. Another use of radioactive isotopes is food irradiation, and basically gamma rays can be used to kill bacteria on certain foods, and this is specifically found useful for spices from tropical countries. Other areas are smoke alarms, which we mentioned with our alpha rays and our americium-241, and agricultural research. The final thing we want to look at is the half-life of a radioactive substance. So the half-life of a radioactive substance is the time taken for half of the nuclei in the radioactive sample to decay. So that's a definition, and that's important. It comes up very frequently when radioactivity appears on exam papers. Every radioactive isotope decays at its own rate. So the term half-life was used to define the rate of decay of an element. So there was no specific length of time that all radioactive isotopes decayed at. So that's where they came up with the idea of the half-life. We're going to look at this now in terms of a graph. So, as you can see from the graph here, we have amount in grams on the y-axis, and we have time in seconds on the x-axis. So, if we take a look at this graph in more detail, if I go to 1 second on my x-axis and I draw a vertical line up until we hit the graph and go across, I will see that after 1 second there is 6 grams of my substance left. Now, in yellow, you'll see if I look at 0 seconds, there is 12 grams of my substance left. So the fact that the mass has dropped from 12 to 6 in 1 second means 50% of my mass is gone. Now, if I draw a line up from 2 seconds and I go across and hit the y-axis, I will see I hit the y-axis at 3 grams. So you can see that I started at 6 grams and finished at 3 grams after 2 seconds, so in that 1 second I have lost 50% of my remaining mass, leaving me with 25% of my original mass remaining. So as you can see here in the bottom, in the first second I lost 6 grams, and in the second second I lost 3. So by a process of prediction, I would hope that between second 2 and second 3 that I would lose half of this 3, so I would lose 1.5 grams. And if I go and check this on the graph, I can see that I will be correct. If I go up and hit the graph and go across, I hit the y-axis at 1.5 grams. So I have now gone from 3 grams after 2 seconds to 1.5 grams after 3 seconds. So I have halved the volume or the amount of my substance that is left. That would mean that as a whole, I have 12.5% of my original mass remaining. And this trend continues as we go along, 50% down to 25, 25 to 12.5. That 12.5 would then go to 6.75, down further, etc. So to summarise, for the half-life, as we progress through each second, we halve the amount of our element that is remaining. So we start with 12 grams after 0 seconds. After 1 second, we go down to 6 grams. After 2 seconds, we go down to 3. After 3 seconds, we go down to 1.5. After 4 seconds, you would go down to 0.75, and so on. So that's it for today's video on radioactivity. It's important to revisit the learning